Hello class, in this lecture video I'd like to take you through some various websites related to web design. So this would be a lecture like you'd get if this were an in-class section, maybe the first week of class, just to give you some background and an overview of different technologies available to you for web design. So I'm just going to start with some text editing programs, and then we'll look at the Adobe programs and then some other sites that would be helpful, and also sites that you might use in the future, not necessarily in this class, since this is, like the beginning, it's the hand coding HTML and CSS class. So if you do run across, for example, a text editing program that you like better and is free, feel free to let me know about that, and I'll take a look at it. But it's certainly up to you what you want to use in this class, as long as your program that you're using does not write the code for you. That you're actually getting in there and writing the code. That's the purpose of this class. So starting with the text editing programs that you're going to probably use this semester, the one that I've kind of settled on as far as a free text editor is called Brackets, and I think it's either owned or managed by Adobe, and it's fairly recently updated, I think maybe last spring, so it seems to work really well. And it does sort of give you some shortcuts, like it'll fill in the closing tags for you as you're typing them, things like that. But it doesn't allow you to or use like a program like Dreamweaver that's a what you see is what you get type of program. It actually has you write the code. So this is what it looks like, and that's just a screenshot of it. That's the website. Now, I talked about downloading it in other videos, so I'm not going to go into that right now, but I did want to mention that first. Also, Notepad, and I thought this was kind of funny to put up the Wikipedia Notepad and text edit pages, because I thought, what's the most boring thing that you could possibly read in your entire life that would put you to sleep? And that would be a Wikipedia page entirely on Notepad, and that's pretty much what it is. So you might use Notepad on a Windows computer to write HTML code, although in my opinion Brackets is better, but typically everyone has used Notepad just to get started writing code. So that's an option. It's already on your computer, and I do use that in my very first tutorial video. But again, I think this is better for Mac or PC. If you're on a PC, we used to use TextEdit, but that I think is a little more complicated than it needs to be for HTML editing. I mean, you can switch it to plain text in HTML, but it is tricky. I mean, most of the time when that happens, it ends up saving in the wrong format. So I would recommend against TextEdit on a Mac for HTML editing, even though it's capable of doing that. I would use Brackets or another free one that you find. I used to use one called Text Wrangler, but there are a number of free ones out there. Okay, so that's what we're going to use in terms of just a basic free text editing software, because you have to have some way to write your code, your HTML and your CSS, save that as a .html file, which then opens up in a browser, just like the site you're looking at right here. So that's really kind of where we start. So now I'm going to go into some other websites that you may or may not use this semester. Some of the Adobe programs we might look at, but generally those are the only programs we're going to use, the text editing. So looking at Adobe, of course, you might think, well, Dreamweaver sounds cool. Can I use that? Well, you can't use it in this class because it is kind of what I mentioned. It's a what you see is what you get type of a program. Although I will say that it's sort of moved more toward the coding side with the last couple updates. So it's a really strong code editing program, but it does have that component that will allow you to design what you want without really touching the code. So my recommendation would be that it's something that you could move to after this semester if you want. Now, we don't teach it anymore. I used to teach a class on it, but we don't currently offer it. I'm hoping maybe I could offer it in the future. It's one of those programs that was really popular for a while, and then it kind of fell out of favor, especially with our advisory board. They recommended us not teach it. But now, the last year or two, it's kind of come back strong. I mean, a lot of people still use Dreamweaver, so it's certainly something to consider. But that's sort of up to you if you want to look at it. Now, I always recommend checking these programs out because you're probably going to have access to the Adobe Creative Cloud at some point. If you're in graphic design and web design, you're going to end up with access to it. Maybe you do the student educational price. It's $20 a month. If you do that for a while, you get access to every single program. But you might want to check it out because it's usually going to be included in your subscription. And of course, Photoshop, I'm just running through the Adobe sites here. But Photoshop, all of these, Dreamweaver, InDesign, Illustrator, they have a free 30-day trial. So I probably would not activate that until later this semester when we actually do Photoshop if you have your own computer. So we'll take a look at just the basics of Photoshop, but you can get by on a trial for this class. But if you do actually want to buy the Adobe Creative Cloud, I would do the educational version for the entire Adobe CC suite of programs, and that's going to be, I think, $20 a month for that. So it's you get a lot for that amount of money, but at the same time, you understand that adds up over the course of a year. But it's better than it used to be. Used to be everybody pay $400 or $500 for the software, and it would last 2 years, and you'd have to upgrade, and it was just a mess. So the subscription does actually work better, in my opinion. And then there's a lot of alternatives out there, like Sketch. And this is something that our advisory board, we have this advisory board. It's made up of people that work around Lexington and Louisville, and they're working in the graphic design, web development industries, video editing, and they give us recommendations. And they mention this. They've mentioned this one a number of times. It's like a simplified Photoshop, and it works really well for web graphics. So a lot of people like to use that. And there's InDesign. This is the Illustrator website. We really wouldn't need InDesign for this class. But a lot of people do like to use Illustrator, even though Illustrator is typically for print. Logos and cartoons and other graphics that you would print out. But a lot of people will use it for like web design and advertising and everything. So it does work for that, for individual web graphics. Very similar to Photoshop in my experience. I've taught both Photoshop and Illustrator. But a lot of people, they really gravitate toward Illustrator. So that's another one to consider. All right, moving into some resources for you here. If you have a Lexington Public Library card, if you don't have one, you can get one if you live anywhere in Kentucky. You usually have to pay a one-time $10 fee if you're not in a surrounding county, but you can get a public library card. Now, if you're out of state, you can usually go to the public library or go to the website of one of the larger cities. So like if you're in Ohio, go to Cincinnati and get their public library card, and then you can get access to lynda.com. So if you get the Lexington Public Library card, you can go to collections, go to databases, click on lynda.com here, and then you can log in with your library card number and your PIN number, and then you have access to a training website that's typically $30 or $40 a month, and tons of web design. This has been around for a long time. It used to be owned by Linda Weinman, but it was purchased by LinkedIn for something ridiculous like $2 billion. But it's really pretty amazing. I mean, it has all kinds of, there's the web designer tracks, learning paths. This is really what you want to use to stay up to date, because you're not always going to be able to take courses, obviously. So this is a good way to stay up to date. And we may use some of this, but I use this more in some of the upper level classes I've taught, because I think for this class, I feel better, giving you my own tutorials than going out and assigning these. And also it can get a little overwhelming. Like let's say I would assign the tutorials that I create, as well as some from this site, and then maybe the W3 schools. That gets to be a little bit much, I think. So I stick with my tutorials mainly, but then I also give you these as optional tutorials. I kind of point you in the right direction. I usually won't do that until later this semester, maybe after midterm. But anyone who wants to work ahead, contact me and I can recommend some courses on here as well. So that's lynda.com. They have other stuff too. You can see I was checking out, I play piano, so I was checking out the jazz piano courses. Those are not very good. So I guess maybe, it was typically a design, graphic design, web design, video. That's what it started as, and that's the strength of it. Thousands of videos on that topic. They branched out. Some of their other stuff is interesting to look at. They have like a drone photography on there, which is kind of cool, and they have some music, some piano things, but those are not very good. Okay, let's talk about some of these sites. I'm sure you've seen them, Squarespace and Wix, and you're probably thinking, well, what is going on here? Do I need to learn web design? Well, sure you do. What you're going to encounter is uh, if you need a custom web design, one that you develop your own graphics for and your own layout, or maybe you're working with a company and they want a more of a custom approach, then that's really what you do. I mean, there's still a lot of need for that. These are template type of websites, and they're great in my experience. I mean, I've used Squarespace before, and it's awesome. But at the same time, your site does look a lot like everybody else's, and it's still going to look good. I mean, there's definitely a place for this. And if not everybody, not all small businesses have the money to hire an independent designer, so they go with companies like this, which is fine. But there's always going to be a need for those custom websites, and also people who can go in there and edit the code and add and change things. Now, WordPress is similar. There's a WordPress.com and a WordPress.org. You've probably heard of those, or maybe you've even tried them out. WordPress.com is very similar to Squarespace and Wix. It's like the front end development. You do everything through the browser, and you don't work with the code as much. You rent space on their server, and it's a pay site. Compared to WordPress.org, this is the open source, the free software. It's a content management system. So what you do is you download these themes, but you have to have a hosting company or your own server to run this. So it's sort of free. I mean, the structure, the framework, the code, and everything is free, but you do have to have some way to run this and get this on the internet. And usually that means a hosting company. You could find a hosting company for like $2 or $3 a month, your own domain name, and then you could create your own site like this. But these are also based on templates that you customize. But this is another reason that this class is really valuable, because these WordPress sites are very popular and a lot of people use them, but you typically cannot customize those the way you want without getting into the code. So I think it helps to know the HTML, especially the CSS. These have pages and pages of CSS to make these templates work. So if you know a little bit about that, it really goes a long way, I think, for these sites, because there are tons of people using these. So those are the WordPress sites, and the Wix and Squarespace, all of those together. Let's see, and then there are some other sites that Adobe has been offering lately. For example, there's Adobe Portfolio. So these are all on their website. You can get like a domain name, like yourname.myportfolio.com. So these I do recommend for like graphic designers. So if you're a graphic designer and you have access to Adobe Creative Cloud and you want to start building your own website eventually, you can use this. The only problem is, again, it's very template based, heavy on photography. So it's good if you want to get a portfolio up quickly, but if you want to go more on the custom site and create the design and get it to look exactly how you want it, that's more of this class that you're taking right now. So you'll probably hear me mention this a lot, that when you go out there on the web, you find templates. So you're going to find templates all over the place. And that's another example of this Adobe Portfolio site. And then there's also Adobe Spark, which is sort of like graphic design that you can create without software. It's not really that great now. I mean, it's kind of generic, but there are some nice examples. I mean, you can see what kind of things you can create with it. So it's not custom either. If you're going to do custom graphic design, you're going to be using a program like Illustrator or Photoshop typically. But Adobe has created this Spark, which is kind of interesting, so you could check that out if you have access to it. And then I just wanted to mention the whole Creative Cloud again. It has a little special for students, and this is all the apps that it includes. So there's like Photoshop and Illustrator and Adobe Premiere for video. After Effects is included, InDesign for desktop publishing. Just all kinds of stuff. There's some new things that I haven't tried yet, like Dimension. There's After Effects. Adobe Animate, it used to be called Flash. It's still around. I don't know anyone using it really, but it is still there for animation. It doesn't use the Flash plugin anymore. It uses HTML5 animation, so it's potentially good. Character Animator is really cool. You can check that one out if you have access to this. So lots and lots of programs for $20 a month. Really an amazing deal. If you've got a computer and you've got that much extra, then it's definitely good if you're going to be in this field. So that is the cloud. And then here's just a couple more sites for you. So moving more on to like the magazine sites and articles, things to keep you up to date on the field. This is smashingmagazine.com. So this has a lot of articles related to web design, web development, graphics, all kinds of things. So you can check that one out when you get a chance. I'll probably have you go there, maybe pick out an article and summarize it with the discussion board assignment. And then let's see, I've got one more here. A List Apart always has some interesting articles as well, and they're still pretty much up to date. So that's another one. So that's a bunch of websites to check out, and just giving you some background in the field and what we're looking at right now. So if you have any questions, anything didn't make any sense, just drop me an email, and that'll be it for this video.